I'm Jeremy Yeager. This is a brief history of the Crusades. And to begin our discussion, I wanted to ask what comes to mind when you think of the Crusades?
The Holy Land.
Knights.
So, obviously, the Crusades take place during the Middle Ages. We like to think of them as only occurring in the Middle East, or at least that's where we like to focus our attention. But that's kind of unfair because the Crusades eventually spread out and become not only an effort to reclaim the Holy Land, but an effort to reestablish Christianity as a dominant power after years of shrinking influence in the world. So the First Crusade began in 1095 when Pope Urban II called for an army to reclaim the Holy Land after a plea for aid from the Byzantine Empire. And I have this quote here from Lumen.com that it sums up the spirit of the Crusades originally, but not really what they evolved into. So it says it started as a widespread pilgrimage in Western Christendom and ended as a military expedition by Roman Catholic Europe to regain the Holy Lands. Like I said, maybe initially that was the spirit, but eventually it evolved into something more. So I'll just give a brief rundown of the First, Second, Third, and Fourth Crusade. As I have up here, the First Crusade was largely successful. The Second Crusade, largely unsuccessful effort on their part. They completely lose all the territory and Crusader states they'd established. With the First Crusade, the Third Crusade, they negate most of the territorial losses in the Second Crusade, except for Jerusalem, which made everyone unhappy, which is why Fourth Crusade was called. But the newly crowned Byzantine emperor decided he didn't want to support this expedition, so the Crusaders turned around and sacked Constantinople, which ironic given the original reason the First Crusade was called for. This just shows that we like to confine the Crusades. We really like to focus on they were just Christianity versus Islam. But as you can see here, that's not the case. This is a crusade called the Cathar Crusade against a heretical group of Christians in southern France. The Pope that called for this crusade wanted them to be completely eradicated off the map. And then we have the Baltic Crusades or the Northern Crusades over here. I have a quote by Alan Murray that he uses a term that I only described as Muslim armies, but he uses it to describe Lithuanians and the Baltic pagans as well. It reads, his Saracens is generally used and indeed preferred term for the last of the Baltic pagans, being used even in preference to the ethnic name Lithuanians. So this just shows that the Crusaders, or the Roman Catholic Church in particular, was conflating the two. So in their eyes, these pagans or Orthodox Christians, as the Lithuanians were around this time, were just as bad in their eyes as the Muslims in the Holy Land. So eventually, due to failure after failure in the 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, and 9th Crusade, eventually the Crusaders lose interest in further crusading, at least in that region. In large part, they had been successful in southern France, Spain, and the Baltic and Scandinavian regions. But with the fall of Acre in 1291, this marks the official end of the Crusades as we like to think about them, just where they were trying to reconquer the Holy Land. So we have the impacts of the Crusades on the East and West. So prior to the Crusades, really it was just Islam running over Christianity everywhere. But after this, they kind of established themselves as, well, one's not going to go away, the other's not going to go away, so now we'll just have to deal with one another. And I have a quote from Mark Cartwright that describes the effect on trade the Crusades have. It says, trade between East and West greatly increased. More exotic goods entered Europe than ever before. And that just shows that most people became poor as a result of the Crusades, but merchants and kings, the Catholic Church, they became very wealthy off this, and they were eager to continue that wealth. And I thought I would just talk about some of the successes in Spain. Here we have the fall of Granada, which was the last Muslim stronghold in Spain. It fell in 1492, and it marks the end of a 700-year conquest of Spain by Christians. So that'll be the end of my discussion.